The first time Lena ever saw Theo cry, he was sitting at her kitchen table with his hand around a chipped mug that said, "Best day ever." It was late winter, a year after they moved into the apartment above the bakery, and a thick belt of snow pressed against the windows. Her grandmother's clock ticked from the hallway like something alive. Theo's shoulders were shaking, and he kept lifting the mug as if to drink, then setting it down again. Wet half-moons of coffee sweating onto the wood. The mug had been a flea market joke when they were 22, but now they were 30, and there was a mortgage on a house they hadn't finished buying yet, and a spreadsheet in the cloud about weddings and flights and vacation days accrued. And Lena had the bad thought, brief as a match, that some objects lie. He wasn't crying from grief, not exactly. He was crying because he had done something and he was sorry. He said this like a sentence he had rehearsed. "I did something. I'm sorry." The words clinked around the room like loose change. He said there had been a conference, a rooftop bar, a row of hothouse plants dusted with city soot, and a woman with a confidence Lena wished she knew how to bottle and sip. A woman who put her hand on Theo's sleeve like they had invented sleeves, like she might be the first person to discover he had arms. Lena listened, with her mouth, not her face. Her face stayed as polite as a dining room. Her mouth said the right questions. What was her name? Did you want it to happen? Did you stop it? Did you tell her you had a fiancé? Her mouth said, "I understand. The way people say no problem when there has been a problem. When the soup spills in their lap and burns a pink map no one else can see." Theo's tears were clean. He had already taken a shower, she realized, because his hair still held the shape of steam. He had come home at 4 a.m. with the taxi's headlights running over the ceiling like two fish in a dim aquarium. He had slid into bed without touching her, even with the small brave toe that used to seek her out in the night. And she had thought, "He is trying not to wake me," as if gentleness were a proof of love. In the morning, he told her everything. Oh no. He told her something carefully shaped to appear like everything. She would learn this later, in the way you learn that a map leaves off a dangerous road, not by the paper itself, but by the ditch you fall into. "I ran into her," he said. "We got a drink. I didn't, Lena, I shouldn't have had dessert with her. I didn't tell you because I thought it would just hurt you, and it was nothing." He jabbed a finger at the printed pies as if they were liars. "What is a camera that doesn't look like a camera?" Lena asked with a voice she was impressed to discover she had. She told him to sleep at his brother's for a week. She told him to delete Kira's number. She told him, because it seemed both generous and sensible, that people made mistakes, and marriage was a decision made daily, like taking your pills or stretching a tendon that tends toward tightness. He nodded, holding his breath like a child about to pass a graveyard. He promised all the correct things. Lena watched him pack a bag. He folded the sweater she had bought him on sale, the one he wore whenever he wanted to look like a better version of himself, an imagined version she had thought was her invention too. He kissed her on the forehead. She let him. After the door closed, Lena stood in the kitchen and peeled 4 clementines over the trash. She had to do something with her hands. She had learned somewhere that citrus oils mean cleanliness, mean cutting through grease. She dropped the bright skins like wrong letters and washed her hands twice. For a week she walked around their rooms like she was pet-sitting her own life. She watered plants. She fed the goldfish. She made the bed more strictly than usual, tucking the corners like she wanted there to be no place for a whisper. She went to work and answered questions about user flows as if love were a website you could get to load on any connection. At night she slept with one pillow wrapped in his t-shirt and told herself that forgiveness is a more adult word for love, the way mortgage is an adult word for home. On the 8th day he came back. He had new flowers and a new way of folding himself smaller, as if an apology had a physical shape. Lena realized there was a kind of relief in the arithmetic of it, pain measured in 7 nights, then returned to sender. She took him back the way you take back a sweater you already wore 2 winters, and whose elbows have gone soft. You press your nose to it and remember the body you were when it fits you best. She decided to forgive and then, like any decision with the marrow of a vow, had to decide again and again. They went to couples therapy once a week with a woman named Andrea who wore quiet shoes and spoke in full paragraphs. It helped. It almost helped. Adria asked about childhood and about models of love and about the stories they told themselves about loyalty and hunger. Lena learned to speak in that therapeutic gerund that both softened and sharpened the heart. I'm noticing that when you say it didn't mean anything, I feel erased. Theo learned to sit on his hands to keep from reaching for her, as if reaching were the same as repair. They were two people building a marriage like a little bridge over a swollen river, laying one plank at a time while the current shoved at their knees. Lena told two people about the cheating, her friend Maya and her friend Jules. She told them different versions, trying them on like outfits and finding that, in each, she was another person's idea of brave. Maya said if he confessed, it means he respects you. Jules said confession is a strategy. Be careful about thinking that pain spoken aloud becomes holy. They both brought wine and the good chocolate. They both pressed their knees against hers on the couch. Their hands were anchors, their eyes lamps. Lena realized that part of what hurt was that her pity for herself kept switching. Places with pity for him the way shy kids trade chairs when the teacher's back is turned. The story kept moving around the room, and the teacher that was Lena didn't always notice fast enough. Spring came late, and with it the house they were buying, a beaten-up Victorian with ceilings like lungs and a porch that listed like a drunk aunt. They hung a bell on the kitchen door because Lena liked the idea of the house telling the air when someone arrived. They planted a row of thyme because the packet said it would forgive bad soil. They argued about paint. They slept, sometimes like children do after swimming for hours, open-mouthed, surrendered, each turned slightly away but their feet meeting as if by rumor. In May, a dress Lena had ordered arrived in a box with tissue and a card that said, "You are capable of joy." It was a pale green like the inside of an apple. She tried it on and thought, if I marry him wearing this, maybe I can teach the dress to recall the good ending, not the almost. Theo came home early and whistled from the doorway like a cartoon wolf. It was good to be wanted in a casual key. It made the wanting seem older than the fight. Later in July, Lena found the receipt. It wasn't even a dramatic discovery. She was looking for the spare keys to lend to the electrician. She opened the bowl where they kept a decade of detritus they insisted was useful. There were ticket stubs and a square of tile from the day the bathroom had been finished and folded into itself like a secret writing class, a strip of printed white paper. The receipt was from a hotel bar in a city they did not live in. It was dated 2 months after the crying at the kitchen table, during a week when Theo had been at a conference in that same city for 2 nights. 2 Aperol spritzes, 1 sparkling water, 1 cheese plate, 2 key lime pies. The timestamp was just after midnight. There was a handwritten smiley face beneath the total, as if a waitress had wanted to bless the night. And here was the remarkable thing. Lena would have forgiven even that. She could have imagined a colleague, a friend, a late meeting. She could have dressed it in the clothes of mundane. What ripped the seam was not the receipt itself, but the note Theo had written on the back absent-mindedly. It seemed a grocery list that wasn't groceries. Green silk, seashells, square gold, a camera that doesn't look like a camera. He had written it in the tone he used for future dinners. His handwriting was neater when he was excited or when he had done something wrong. This looked like both. She turned the paper over, looked again at the date, thought of the dress in her closet, thought of her own green, the apple of it, and felt something small and ancient in her throat tuck itself away. Lena waited. She didn't ask. Not yet. She wanted to be calm and upright, to see the whole city from the hill, not from the alley. She went to dinner with Maya and didn't mention it. She fluttered the receipt like a bird in the pocket of her cardigan, a quiet trapped thing that had not decided to be either fact or danger. She hadn't told Jules about the therapy at first because she feared the sentence I told. You so in the face that would never say it. She had by now told Jules. Jules had listened like a church with no sermon. This time Lena told no one. She wanted to be the kind of person who solved something with one conversation and not a chorus. That night, she put the receipt on the kitchen table and set a glass of water on top of it, as if it were a napkin under a drink. When Theo came in the door, the bell they'd hung gave its bright little truth. He saw the glass on the table and knew immediately that it was not thirst. His face went shabby. "That's old," he said, before he had really looked. "It's from May," Lena said, "from when you went to the conference. It looks festive." Theo's mouth tried to decide whether to be angry or sorry, and then found neither would do him any good. He sat down in the chair where he had cried that winter like some objects arrange a person. His eyes did exactly the same tear thing as before. She watched him and felt like she was watching a documentary where a species did a mating dance and you had no idea whether it was beautiful or lethal to the bird itself. When he came home, Belle, truth she told him. She did not say Kira's name again. She said, "I can love you and still not build a life on this. I thought forgiveness was a bridge to the same town. It turns out it's a bridge to a different town where I am not married to you." He nodded and wept and bargained, the way bodies bargain with fevers. She let him talk and did not touch him. Love is an excellent liar, and touch is its favorite accent. They split the house. It was not as dramatic as it could have been. He kept the blue couch, she kept the lamp and the green dress and the bell. She signed over her share of the mortgage, and he took on the loan because guilt has an accountant and math is sometimes a mercy. He moved into the Victorian and filled it with the kinds of things men buy when they live alone. Large speakers and a set of knives whose block looked like a small patient fortress. Lena stayed in the apartment above the bakery. The goldfish died in the week after the decision. She cried then, because bodies asked for any excuse. The months after were not a revelation. They were just months. Grief is not a straight line, but it is a route you eventually know well enough to walk without a map. Lena saw more of Maya and Jules. They cooked on Sundays and looked at the small ways women save one another's lives, reminding each other to drink water, texting pictures of shoes, staying on the phone while the other person walks home alone at night. She started to take photographs again, the old hobby she had dropped when Love and Theo took up most of her hands. She liked the old-school cameras you had to wind, liked the sound the advanced lever made like a breath you could hear. She took photographs of people's hands and of things that never moved, doors, bridges, a row of utility poles that looked like a hymn. One afternoon in early winter, the first year after Lena went to the old neighborhood, because the bakery had changed owners and she wanted to see if they still dusted the top buns with sugar. She took the stairs up out of habit and then laughed at herself at the top, at the door that was no longer hers. She had kept the bell, and this door was just a door. There was a package leaning against the jamb. She looked around and no one watched her. The hallway was empty and generous. The label said Theodore Gunn, and in smaller letters the Victorian address. The shipping company had gotten lazy and dropped the box at the old spot. She picked it up. It was heavier than she had expected. Her arms remembered the weight of 100 groceries. She took it down the stairs and into the crisp, flake-filled air and started walking toward the house she no longer lived in. It took 20 minutes. The sidewalks were half salt, half sparkle. As she turned onto Theo's street, she saw him on the porch struggling with a string of lights that had spontaneously knit itself into a bad memory. He was swearing in that theatrical whisper people use when trying to seem charmingly defeated by inanimate objects. He looked up and saw her. The surprise on his face rearranged itself into what looked like gratitude. They stood in the bright cold like people who once knew the other's mouth. She felt old and young and exactly the age she was. She wished him a good year. He wished her the same. She turned to go and he said her name and she turned back, and for a second, less than a second, she saw the life they might have built if the receipt had not existed, if the winter night had not existed, if wanting could be wallpapered over with enough therapy and time. It was a beautiful, terrible future. It was a room she no longer had to live in. On her way home, Lena stopped at the river. Ice was forming in that tentative lace it makes when it doesn't yet believe in itself. A boy in a red hat was throwing bread to birds with a seriousness one usually reserves for prayer. She took a photograph of his hands, the arc of bread, the patient air. Then she took one of the far bank, the slope of trees that looked like inky ribs. Her breath made a taste in her mouth like pennies in snow. She tucked the camera back into her coat and kept walking. That night she wrote a letter, longhand, on paper you have to be deliberate about. She wrote it to the version of herself who had peeled clementines over the trash, and to the version who had sat with Kira in the cafe, and to the version who had thrown away the bell because she didn't want to hear every coming and going anymore. She wrote, "We were not wrong to try. We were not wrong to stop. We were not wrong to want the gentlest word for harm, and then to learn the right one. It was betrayal. It was love. It was both. You survived the weather, and now you get to decide what to plant." In spring, Lena took a trip alone to the coast. She stayed in a small hotel that smelled of bleach and lemon and had a breakfast room where everything came in a bowl. She walked the dunes and the thin, hard beach where the ocean looked like a sentence being worked on by a meticulous teacher. She fell in conversation with an older woman who was painting the same rock over and over in different lights. The woman said that the trick was not to think of rockness, but of shadow. Lena thought of the receipt and the dress and the camera leva and how, for months she had wanted a single truth to stand up and perform. She thought of Kira's sentence, that you could be sorry for the harm but not for the wanting, like it was a little dangerous mirror she kept in her pocket to remember the shape of her own face. On the last morning, she put on the green dress and walked down to the beach. She stepped into the surf up to her ankles and laughed because the Atlantic does what it wants and always has. A man with a dog waved at her as if to say, "Look at us, two creatures choosing our weather." She waved back. The dog barked at the sea. Lena felt neither alone nor saved, which perhaps is what grown happiness feels like when it is being modest. When she returned to the city, she hung the bell on her own door. It was ridiculous to hold on to it, but she did. She liked the sound. It did not mean someone I love is home. It meant someone has entered. Pay attention. She planted thyme in a shallow pot and crushed a leaf between her fingers and smelled how the plant releases its usefulness only when you bruise it. That seemed like information. Months later, at dusk, Lena was on a bus when she saw Kira on the sidewalk, laughing at something only she could hear, her head tipped back, the particular electric ease of her. Lena could have pressed the bell and gotten off. She could have followed her into the evening. She could have bought her a drink and asked her what it was to live as a woman who could be both apology and avalanche. She did not. She watched her pass like a landmark you only need to see once to know where you are. At home, she developed her photos in her little dark room. Hands and doors and utility poles emerged from liquids like truths from waiting. She watched as the image of the boy feeding birds became the boy himself, bred mid-air, the birds smarter than hunger, the river still deciding how to be. She pinned the picture to a line with a wooden clip. She stood there while the wet paper dripped. She thought, "I will fall in love again. It will not be fair or safe or proofed like a wedding cake. It will be a risk the size of a person. I am not the woman who forgave everything. I am the woman who learned which bridges lead to towns where my feet remember how to live." And if she thought of Theo, if his name still did that clumsy adolescent thing inside her ribs, yes, well, the heart is a badly behaved house guest. You give it tea and tell it stories, and then you ask it to leave, and sometimes it stays a little longer sleeping on the couch learning your morning. One day it is gone and it has left the cup washed and set upside down to dry. One day you open your door and no one comes in but you. The bell rings anyway. In the long middle of a life, Lena put on the green dress for herself and took her own picture in the mirror with the camera that looks like a camera. Behind her, the window showed only the ordinary city. In the photograph, she is not smiling and she is not crying. She is looking directly at the person who is looking at her. And whatever story comes next will have to come honestly or not at all.